You're here till it's done.
Directed by Denis Kryuchkov, we are talking The Healing, and this is a new age folk horror from Russia. Yes, a Russian movie from what I can tell, although it is spoken in English, I believe. We'll touch on that again in just a second. So, what's the story? It focuses on three women as they go to a remote spiritual retreat for some soul healing. Our main character, Lyuba, is a woman who's had a difficult life, you might say. She's on the kind of the verge of being suicidal, somewhat of an abusive husband and potentially abusive father as well. And she's there with her two friends, one of which is kind of like a new age crystal buying type, the other being like a kind of bit more of a party slutty girl type. So the three of them go to this very remote on an island, kind of little getaway retreat, and then they meet a bunch of kind of new age hippie types into kind of chanting and yoga and the rest of it, and these three women seem to then kind of go in a almost like a hypnotic state or a trance. Lyuba especially is seems to be affected, having weird hallucinations, including this kind of visions of this ghostly entity, this female entity that could be a supernatural force, or is it actually some type of mental coping mechanism? We have her abusive husband wanting to kind of chase after her. What'll happen? You will have to watch the movie and find out. So let us discuss. Let's talk about the Russian situation. So yes, this was a Russian film from what I can see, and I got this as a screener, so I've only watched the version that was provided to me, and it is English language, and it appears to be dubbed, but I believe it might have been spoken in English, but then kind of redubbed. So probably, from what I can tell, and this is my speculation, is that the original dialogue may have been spoken in English by like Russian actors, but then re-recorded with like American actors to give it, you know, more of that sort of naturalistic feel for Western audiences, because, you know, it has this kind of ADR feel to it. The audio doesn't feel like it quite matches the what's happening on screen, but the lip syncing looks like it's more or less kind of fits, if that makes sense. So it looks like the words are spoken in English, but they've been re-recorded with like an American voice cast, or at least that's what it seems to me. I don't know if there's other versions available. This is just the version that I watched, so just bear that in mind. Anyway, let's talk about what works in this movie's favour. I've seen a few Russian productions, and I have to say, generally speaking, the ones that I've seen, the production value is always pretty good, and it's true of this one. It does look like this sort of very out-of-the-way retreat with these kind of hippie types that are way into this kind of thing, and you kind of believe that these are such like a cut-off little community, that they are very much into this kind of lifestyle and have little outside influence, and the way that this movie predicts, you know, kind of shows us on screen that you have to get this kind of like rickety old boat over to this island and stuff, and they just kind of live there and are at one with the goddess and all the rest of it. So, but it feels like you can buy into it because of the way this production is done, and you know, lots of kind of like ritual stones and chanting and kind of banging on drums and everything like that. I think it kind of represents that pretty well. The thing I would say in positives, we do have this kind of like entity that seems to be ever watching in the kind of the trees, and then it kind of manifests as this kind of like misty sort of female figure, which is constantly kind of got like black smoke kind of coming off her and stuff. It's really well done, and they don't kind of like overdo the special effects, but it does look ethereal. One issue I have sometimes with ghost films is sometimes these kind of ghosts look too corporeal, but here it looks very sort of ethereal and kind of mystical in some ways and stuff. And I think it goes quite well with this sort of you know, New Age style film that this is. And if you were into this kind of New Age beliefs, all this kind of paganism, crystal, all the rest of it, then you may enjoy this movie, I think, because it definitely is playing to that and going into those kind of like those types of those, you know, people that are into it. Her friend, who's very much into this, is quite almost like the comedy relief. She's got a huge amount of screen time, but she's very enthusiastic about going to this kind of this spiritual retreat and all of this. On a technical level, I've got to say this movie's proficiently made. It's, you know, well shot. I think, again, with these kind of Russian productions, quite often I find that the production always is very crisp, and it does look good, and it's kind of well photographed, great cinematography, lighting, all the rest of it. That was all pretty good. I feel like I can't really comment too much on the acting because the, as I say, I feel like the lines here have been probably completely ADR'd, so the performances that we get, you know, it's hard to really judge because they don't feel quite natural because it does feel like ADR. This will lead me to what doesn't work. I mean, it has that sort of, the audio, at least on the version I did, there may well be a Russian language version which you can watch subtitles, I don't know. But it has that sort of fake feeling, the ADR feeling. So the kind of the voices that are coming out, the characters, feel like they're coming from like a booth, if that makes it. It doesn't feel like they're coming from this kind of open countryside and things like that. You know, there's very little in the regards to like ambient noise kind of going on and stuff. So it has that sort of artificial feeling. I will say as well, the only thing I would say with the acting is the some of the kind of the physical acting is a little bit over the top. You know, you feel like people, you know, they're rolling their eyes back and all the rest of it. It was a little bit kind of like, it's a little bit over the top at times. It wasn't terrible, but yeah, sometimes I felt at least the physical acting was at times a touch much. I have to say, I thought the setup of this movie was kind of quite strong, but I gotta say, once we kind of get to this island and we start having these kind of interactions with the kind of the denizens of this island, it gets a little bit kind of like rinse and repeat. Oh, weird stuff like hallucinations, you know, spiritual journeys. We don't quite know what's real, what's a hallucination. Our main character, Lyuba, seems to like really flip-flop on what she kind of wants to do. One minute she's really into it, the other minute she kind of wants to escape. She wants to go back with her husband, then she doesn't, and it's just like, she seems a particularly kind of indecisive woman, I have to say, and therefore quite frustrating. And you know, she just seems to flip-flop on whatever seems to be the most convenient to her at the time. And it doesn't make for a particularly compelling lead character, I have to say. I mean, I get that, you know, we learn through the movie that she's this kind of abused woman and I guess mentally vulnerable. But, you know, I feel when we're watching this movie, she just seems to sort of really have no idea what she wants and just gravitates to whatever the thing is that is appropriate at the time, and then changes her mind literally minutes later. So it makes for a frustrating watch at times. Once we get into the retreat, our two other women just seem to disappear. We don't really kind of see them again. And I get that it's focusing on our kind of main character because it's her story, but they just seem to kind of disappear in the background. And it almost felt like this movie should have had a little bit more sort of screen time with those characters, so we could see like the juxtaposition, how they're dealing with it. I mean, is it just our main character that's having these sort of supernatural encounters or spiritual encounters, or is it the others as well? I feel it needed to have, because the little we do see, they do seem to buy into the whole thing, but we never really get that much screen time of the two friends once they're there, so we never get that comparison, so to speak. There's lots of kind of scenes here that are like trippy and hallucinogenic, and you're not quite sure, you know, what you're seeing is meant to actually be happening, or whether it's actually sort of just a hallucination. You know, it hints to that there is some type of kind of supernatural shenanigans going on, but the movie is very, very ambiguous as to what the actual hell is going on, to be honest. And I have to say, I just think it feels like this movie treads water once it gets past the initial sort of setup of this movie, and narratively it's just kind of like milling around. And I felt ultimately this movie was it didn't really bring you along for a kind of a narrative ride. It felt like it was just kind of meandering, I have to say. Ultimately, I think this movie is it's a well shot movie, and on a technical level it's very proficient, but I've got to say narratively it ended up being a little bit dull and confusing, if I'm honest. So if you're well into the kind of the new age thing, you may want to check it out. But I think there could have been more made of this, I have to say. I'm going to say this is actually a slightly below average movie, in my opinion. Just looking at it as a story as a whole, particularly, I found it somewhat unsatisfying. I'm going to give it a 4 out of 10. Have you seen it? What were your thoughts? Please do leave me a comment and I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.